Everyone?
Good morning, Rabbi.
We're learning Mishnayos Kesubos, Parak Daled, Chapter 4. We are up to Mishnah Ches, Mishnah 8. And today we'll be doing Mishnah Ches and Tes, 8 and 9. Okay, so yesterday the Mishnah that we were learning discussed if the husband does not write a ksuba for her at all, taking a guarantee or promising to give her the 200 or 100 zuz if he dies or divorces her, and that if he doesn't write in the doc in the ksuba that all his properties are pledged towards paying her the ksuba. All these things, even if they're not written, they are a Tanai Bezdin, they're a requirement of the Bezdin, and they take hold, and he's obligated even if he doesn't write it. Now, we have other examples of this. Lo kasav la im tishtavai efrekinach v'svinach lila into. If he didn't write in his ksuba, if you are taken captive, if you are kidnapped, I shall redeem you and take you back as a wife. So we don't have that in our ksubas nowadays. However, it is an obligation that the Chachamim put upon a husband, and it was written in the ksuba that if she is kidnapped, he is obligated to ransom her. And not only that, after he ransoms her, he will keep her for a wife. Meaning, even though there is a very strong possibility that she was violated while she was taken captive, and that he may decide that because of that he's not interested in her anymore, the Chachamim said he has to redeem her and he has to take her back as a wife. Now, the case of the Mishnah is, let's say he didn't write it in the ksuba. Or, ubekehanes, let's say the wife of a Kohen. He didn't write, ahadrinich limdintich. I will bring you back to your country. Meaning, if it's the wife of a Kohen who was taken captive, then even if she was violated, she didn't do anything willing, but she was violated, she'll be forbidden to the Kohen. So, in a case where a Kohen's wife is kidnapped, he has to divorce her, and he cannot, but he promises, but he has an obligation to redeem her and to bring her back to her country, meaning to bring her back to where she came from. She can't stay with him anymore, so he promises to bring her back to where she came from. Chayiv, even if he didn't write this, he's still obligated. He's still required to do it. Shutanai Beis-Din, because it is a requirement decreed by Beis-Din, decreed by the sages, that these are his obligations no matter what. So even though they were written in the ksuba, nonetheless, even if they weren't written in the ksuba, even if he didn't write it, he's still obligated. So again, if he has a Yisrael or a Levi, and his wife taken captive, he has to redeem her and take her back as a wife. If it's the wife of a Kohen, where again, in either case, where because she was taken captive, we have to strongly suspect that she was violated, and by a Kohen, she can't remain married to me if she was violated. He has to promise her in the ksuba to bring her back home, bring her back to where she came from, and even if he didn't write it, he's still obligated. Now, Mishnah Tes. The first part of Mishnah Tes is going to be a little bit repetitive. We just learned it, but it's going to be the point is to lead into the next part. Nishbes, she was kidnapped, she was taken captive. Chayiv liftais, he's obligated to redeem her, as we just said. Vimamar. Now let's say this man says, Haregito ksubasa. You know what? I'm divorcing her, and here's her ksuba. Tiftas atzma. Let her go ahead and redeem herself. Why do I have to go ahead and be the one to redeem her? I'm divorcing her. I'm not interested in her anymore. And and I'll give her the ksuba money, and she'll use that to ransom herself. So basically, he's trying to get away from his obligation to redeem and to take her back as a wife. And he says, you know what? She has to be redeemed. I'll give her the ksuba. Einoi rashoi. He is not allowed to do that. The point is that a man becomes obligated to ransom his wife as soon as she is captured. Once that obligation takes effect, he cannot free himself of it by divorcing her. Okay, so basically, she was kidnapped. Once she's kidnapped, the obligation, he's obligated now. He's obligated to pay the ransom. Whatever it's going to be, he's obligated to pay. Once that obligation takes effect, he cannot decide, I'm going to get out of it by divorcing her because she's not my wife anymore. How's she going to get free? I'll give her the ksuba. You can't do that. Next. Laksa chayv paisa. Let's say she gets sick. So he is obligated to heal her. That means he has to pay. He has to make sure he has to pay for her medical needs. This obligation of paying for medical needs falls under the category of his obligation to support her. There's an obligation called mezainis. Mezainis literally means support of food, but it also includes where to live, and it also includes that he is going to heal her. The same way you have to feed her to sustain her, if she's sick, he has to heal her. He has to pay for for her to be healed. Omar, now here will be something interesting, something different. Omar, if the guy says, Haregito ksubasa, here's a divorce and here's a ksuba. Terapias atzma, let her heal herself. Rashai, he's permitted to do that. Now, the question is, why is he permitted? He wasn't permitted to do that before when she was taken captive, but now when she's sick, he is able to do it. Why? So first thing I want to mention is that they bring on here from the Rambam that although a husband can exempt himself from paying for his wife's medical expenses by divorcing her, it is certainly immoral and improper for him to do so. So that's number one. It's immoral to do that. But you can't say that he's not, that you can't force him to otherwise. You can't tell him, sorry, you're already obligated. And the explanation is like this. Now listen to this. As we said before, by the redemption, by when she's taken captive, as soon as she is kidnapped, he's obligated at that point to pay for her freedom. And once he's obligated, he can't just, free himself of it by divorcing her. Let me ask you a question. The obligation to feed her food is obligation that once he marries her, he's obligated now for the rest of their marriage to does it become an obligation that says now you're obligated right now for every single day that you're married? Actually, every single day is a new obligation. Every day has its own food, has its own sustenance. Every day you need to be sustained, and every day you get a new obligation. It's not like an obligation at the beginning of marriage that covers everything. It's when you get married, you're obligated to sustain her daily. She has daily needs. You have to take care of her daily needs. But these are daily obligations. And therefore, if he decides to divorce her, so okay, he can't necessarily, I'm adding this. If he, let's forget it. Right now, he divorces her, right? So now, tomorrow she needs medical care. Is she his wife? No. Mm-hmm. And it's a new obligation. It's that day's obligation. But by that day's obligation, she's not his wife anymore. So technically, he's able to get out of it. Since the obligation of feeding her is a daily obligation, okay, so if let's say he has to pay for her medical, he has to pay for her medical needs for a certain day, right? On that day, if he decides to divorce her, he'll probably still have to pay for the medical needs of that day. But the next days, which is a new obligation, she's not his wife anymore. So let me read you how they explain it here. Okay, a husband must pay for his wife's medical treatment each day, just as he must pay for her support each day. If he divorces her, the next day's obligation will take effect after the divorce, when she's no longer married to him. Therefore, he would not have to pay the medical expenses of that day or any subsequent days. The obligation of ransoming one's wife is different, because the husband becomes obligated at one time to pay the entire ransom. Once this obligation takes hold, it remains in place even after he divorces her. So that's the difference between the case where she was taken captive and when she gets sick. But at the end of the day, as the Rambam says, it is immoral and improper for him to basically, when she is sick, divorce her and say, here's your ksuba money, take care of yourself. Okay. Now, I'll now give you another example of where there is no prohibition of rechilas, meaning to tell someone what someone else did or said about them. Kagon, for instance, he heard someone say, if I meet so-and-so in this place, I'm going to either beat him up or I'm going to let him have it. Or he heard that he plans on damaging this person monetarily. So here's the situation. Reuven hears Shimon say, I am planning on harming Levi. Whatever your example may be. That's what Reuven heard Shimon say. So now, can he tell Levi about that? Tali Bazet depends on this. If, let's say, this person, we know about him that he's done this before, meaning Shimon, who threatens this, has carried out these kind of threats. He's done this many times to others. Or you recognize this is not just, he's not just bluffing. He's not just talking big. He means it. Then you need to tell Levi, the person who he is threatening, about it. So that he'll be able to protect himself from any kind of embarrassment or damage. Nonetheless, you also have to make sure that all the conditions we mentioned before about being permitted to tell Rechilas to someone for constructive purpose are met. Now here he also says, a condition that he actually didn't mention before, but now he says, and this only applies if Reuben went over to Shimon, who's threatening, and he rebuked him, and he didn't listen. He's not listening. You rebuke him, and he's not listening. Or you evaluate the situation, and you see that your rebuke's not going to help. Then you can go in and tell the person. But otherwise, if you don't know if there's a possibility that it could work, then you need to go ahead and either rebuke him or try to appease him some way, calm him down. Maybe through that his anger will go away. And by doing this, you'll number one gain that you won't have to speak rechilas about him to the other person. You also fulfill the positive commandment of rebuking and of bringing peace. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.